There's been a lot of confusion about how Nebris works. People have been bamboozled into believing she's a support unit. If I knew this was going to be a problem, I would have made this review even before she came out. So, sorry for that. But here's how she really works. Nebris has two completely separate buffs. These buffs cannot be activated at the same time. Her default is a damage increase. If she already has a damage increase buff, she will instead use a critical damage buff. These buffs are only on herself. No one else get these benefits. That is the long and short of how she works. So as of right now, the only one who provides a damage buff is Beach Angel Therese. So you can look at it this way. If Beach Angel Therese is not on your team, Nebris is guaranteed to use her default buff. So the question here is, which buff is better? I'll spare you the math and say Nebris paired with a +0 Therese that has all of her potentials unlocked is always going to be better than pairing Nebris with a +5 Gamer Ravina. Granted, you can reliably land your critical hits. Now with that out of the way, Labyrinth Gatekeeper Nebris is extremely mediocre, and there's several factors to this. Let's start with the most glaring part, which is her skill damage. Her skill damage with both hits combined is 472%. If you utilize her 150% damage buff, it jumps up to 1180%. Well, what gives? Isn't this really high? Yes, it is. Nebris' stats are some of the best in the game, but it suffers from the same problem from Beach Justice Michaela, which is that she has no horizontal range. And despite me being as charitable to Michaela as possible, she only got a 6 out of 10. And I can already tell you up front, Nebris, even in her best case scenario, is not being ranked higher than Michaela. The only reason why Michaela works well enough is because her skill can be spammed every turn. So as long as you can manipulate the enemies into a column, this works out. But we've recently seen just how much better having some horizontal range is with the release of Knight of Jealousy Levia. Even with the fall off mechanic, Levia is still able to decimate enemies that need decimating. She's so much easier to play around. Now we have Gatekeeper Nebris, who does the same thing as Michaela but not every turn. But wait, you say, we have Lifeguard Nebris for horizontal range. And you'd be correct in stating that, except now we're talking about 2-turn setups, because we need to use Gatekeeper Nebris first for the buff. Without that, her damage really doesn't measure up to today's standards, and even in long-form content, that 50% attack buff doesn't mean a whole lot, and the wildly different range patterns can cause problems in Fiend hunts. So what we have here is Neowiz trying to make a new archetype that started with Narthis, which is column nuking. It's the 3x3 pattern's greatest weakness because it's always those 1 or 2 enemies that aren't in range and then obliterate your team. When it comes to situations like that, Gatekeeper Nebris is pretty much perfect for the job. She's not meant to be your main damage unit. She's meant to be the cleanup or setup to ensure that everything can go down in 1 turn. But what if you have 2 units that aren't in the same column? What if you can't set it up so that they can be in the same column? What happens then? She has one fairly strong niche, but as it stands right now, that niche isn't necessary. Neowiz has to make content where column nukers like Nebris can be very strong. The problem is the game just lacks that type of nuance. The game's enemy design needs to become more sophisticated in order for this to shine. So let me get this out the way because I know this is going to be an argument. Nebris has a place in PvP. I do not rate PvP, but if there is a place where Nebris has the potential to shine, it's there. Being 3 SP with a guaranteed full column attack is very good. I can see her being potentially strong on defense. But as far as PvE content is concerned, she's not quite there. And with her lifeguard costume only really held together by Nebris' phenomenal stats, I can see her getting a rework later down the line. But as it stands right now, she gets a 4 out of 10. When she works, she really works, but it's hard to justify that investment right now. Now, if you can just indulge me for a moment, I like to talk about Nebris on a more broad perspective. I like to frame my reviews as standalone content, so I held off on talking about the Senran Kagura collab that is incoming until now. Nebris has no story content, and her profile is lacking of any substance. The event she has been coupled with has no story mode, and even her skill animation doesn't have a lot going on, and lacks the pizzazz that units like Levia and even Justia has, coupled with the lifeguard costume that is in an even worse state. I can't help but think Neowiz accidentally made a unit that was just made to make you jolly, if you know what I mean. I say it's accidental because it's very clear to me that the scenario writers for Brown Dust 2 are relying a lot on what has already been established in Brown Dust 1. And it just so turns out that Nebris is a Brown Dust 2 original. I think Neowiz just has really bad planning because Nebris really feels like she was just shoved out the door, as if they realized they made a promise they couldn't keep when they announced Nebris would become playable in September. And this is only emphasized by how really fucked up the scheduling has been this entire month. So Neowiz had to make a choice here. Make Nebris a fan favorite, a really good and appealing unit right before the collab, or they make her a skip. And here's the thing, the Senran Kagura collab is going to have 3 other wind units. So it's very, very likely that Nebris is going to be outdone very quickly. So yes, as of right now, Nebris is a skip, and I highly recommend skipping her. And that is very disappointing to say. But hey, at least she has the best idle animation in the game.